All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is July 6th, 2025, about 8:30 p.m. where I am right now. It's been a lovely day. Great weather if you're into summer out here in Budapest. Just been at the crib, cleaning up. Just had a family friend leave. And now we are back reading our 13th book in our Book to React series, Black Bolshevik, Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist, written by Harry Haywood. This book came out in 1978. It's a very rare book. If you want to get it for yourself on Amazon, it'll run you £630, 630 pence to get that thing. Or in paperback, about 50. Still, a very rare book. This is why we do these book react series, because we don't want these rare books to go out of print and then be forgotten and lost. This is a part of like preserving the memory, the legacy of these great writers. And yeah, if you want to pick up the book for free as well, just go to libcom.org and just click this link right here. You can get it for yourself. I mean, you know, Harry Haywood is a communist. I'm sure he would be fine. God rest his soul. God rest his soul. So, we're not going to be spending a lot of time on the live stream right now. The channel is blowing up. It's active right now. Every few months, the white supremacists come across my channel and help it go viral. So they're all welcome to jump into the chat. I'm sure my soldiers will hold it down. But we're looking forward to continuing Chapter 2, as Harry Haywood is talking about his time in the U.S. military, going abroad to Europe. That's where we left off in Chapter 2. We're going to be continuing with that right here as I give commentary. But we'll only be on live for about an hour or so. I got to work out, got to do something. I've been sitting down all day catching up on paperwork. Hard to do paperwork, hard to catch up on work when you got niggas sleeping on your couch. All right, so now that we're finally back in regular mode, back in work mode, back in grind mode, we're ready to get to it. So we're picking up here, Chapter 2. We're going to knock this out and then call it a day. So let's go. So it was here in France, by the way, he's in France, however, that we made our first acquaintance with two pests, the rat and the louse, whom thereafter were our inseparable companions for our entire stay at the front. Undoubtedly, there were more rats than men. There were hordes of them, regiments and battalions of rats. They were the largest rats I had ever seen. We soon became tired of killing them. It seemed a wasted effort. They should have had cats there. Where were the Turks? Where were the Turks? I know there was at least one Turkish guy in the regiment saying, "Brother, we need to get cats." Some of the rats became quite bold, even impudent. They seemed to say, "I've got as much right here as you have." They would walk along, pick up food scraps, and eat them right there in front of you. The dark dugouts were their real havens. When we slept, we would keep our heads covered with blankets as protection against rat bites. This may seem flimsy protection, but we were so conditioned that we would wake at any attempt on the part of a rat to bite through the blanket. I have often wondered why there were so few rat bites. Probably the rats felt that it was not worthwhile fooling with live humans when there were so many dead ones around. We soon got used to the rats and learned to live with them. Ugh, nasty, nasty work. War is hell. War is hell. Don't join the army, fellas. Don't join the army. It was the same with the lice. I woke up lousy after my first sleep in a dugout. See, I always thought black people couldn't get lice. I always thought there's two benefits of being black. You can't get sunburned and you can't get lice. I didn't know you could get lice. I've never heard of a black person with lice. In fact, I grew up thinking only white people had lice and we made fun of them for that. Anyway, I woke up lousy after my first sleep in a dugout. My reaction to the pests took the following progression. First, I was besieged by interminable itching, followed by depression. Then I began to lose appetite and weight, finally becoming quite ill. All this was within a period of a few days. Most of the fellows exhibited the same symptoms. One might say that our illness was mainly psychological, but it was nonetheless real. Since this was a quiet front, I had no difficulty in getting permission to go back to the rear for a few hours. Foolishly, I thought if I could get cleaned up just once, I would feel a lot better. But I got some delousing soap, took a bath, and washed my clothes. I then returned to the front, stood machine gun watch, and then went into the dugout for a nap. Needless to say, I woke up lousy again. I told my troubles to an old French veteran who had been assigned to my machine gun squad. "Oh, it's nothing. You must forget all about it," he said. "You'll get used to it. I've been at the front for nearly 4 years, and I've been lousy all the time. Ugh. Except when I was in the hospital or at home on leave. Oh, that's gross. That's nasty work. I took his advice, which was all to the good, because I was not to be rid of these pests until 6 months later, during my sojourn in hospitals at Mont-sur-Seine and Paris after the armistice. Even then, it was only a temporary respite, for I was reinfected upon rejoining my regiment at the embarkation port at Brest. After a brief stay with the regiment, I was returned to the hospital again, deloused, only to be reinfected again on the hospital ship returning to the United States. I parted company with my last louse at the debarkation hospital at Grand Central Palace in New York City. So he never saw any action on the front, which is a good thing. I mean, I wouldn't want the brother to get, have to live with a body on his soul, you know what I mean? And on top of that, him possibly getting killed. But he went out to France and was just basically chilling with rats and lice. Okay. So we remained in the Saint Mihiel sector about 2 weeks. Oh, I thought he was jumping ahead. Sorry. Who knows? Who knows if he saw action? Let's see. All right. We remained in the Saint Mihiel sector about 2 weeks. We were then withdrawn and moved into a sector in the Argonne Forest near Verdun, site at the Great Battles of 1916. We arrived there in late July 1918. We were still brigaded with the 10th French Division. The area around Verdun was a vast cemetery with 500,000 crosses of those who had perished in that great Holocaust, each bearing the legend, Mort pour la France, death for France. So the Argonne at that time was also a quiet sector, but it was here that we suffered our first casualty, Private Robert M. Lee of Chicago. The incident occurred during machine gun target practice. The first and second line trenches ran along parallel hills about 100 yards apart. The French had set up a makeshift range in the valley in between the trenches. Behind the gun, there was a 2 or 3 foot rise in the earth on which a number of us French and blacks were sitting, chewing the rag, awaiting our turn at the machine gun. Suddenly, there was a short burst of machine gun fire. It was not from our guns. Bullets whizzed over our heads. They seemed to be coming from behind the target. All of us scrambled to get into the communication trench, which opened on the valley. Second Lieutenant Binga Desmond, our platoon commander, and the University of Chicago's great sprinting star, fell from the embankment on top of me. Fortunately, he was not hit. But even with his 180 pounds on my back, I am sure I made that 10 or 15 yards to the communication trench, crawling on my hands and knees as fast as he could have sprinted the distance. Okay, so he did see some action. He did get shot at. The fire was coming from behind the target. What obviously had happened was that the Germans had cased the position of our guns and had somehow got around behind the target and waited for a pause in our target practice to open fire on us. We never found out how they did it, for none of us knew the exact topography of that place and was safe, and that they had been using the range for months. All right, I need to get a charger. I'm going to ask my wife, Acty, can you bring the charger real quick for me? My phone's about to die. Sorry about that. Got to pause that right here. Also got to put my phone on low battery mode. Yeah, the one that I can plug in. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I love you so much. You're the best. Let me plug that in. Hold on. Just a little pause. Get married, fellas. Get married. Amen. Let me put that on low battery. Let me take off the low battery. Don't allow. Hold on. Low battery. Nope. All right, and now we're good. We're good. Once again, I keep the phone on right here. Keep the phone on right here in case anybody jumps into the chat and we react to the chat. But anyway. So yeah, they were getting shot at by the Germans from behind, etc. So we never found out how they did it, for none of us knew the exact topography of the place. The French, of course, knew it, but they had assured us that the place was safe and that they had been using the range for months. We were crouched down, panting, in the communication trench for about 5 minutes after the German guns ceased fire. The French lieutenant, bless his soul, then sent a French gun crew out to get the gun. To our great surprise, they also brought back Robert M. Lee. He was quite dead, with bullets right through the heart. He had evidently been hit by the first burst and had fallen forward in front of the embankment. All of us were deeply saddened by the incident. Saw bodies. This is the second time he's seen a dead body. No one spoke as we bore his body back to the rear. He was only 19, a very sweet fellow, and he was our first casualty. We buried him down in the valley, besides the graves of those fallen at Verdun. The funeral was quite impressive. He was given a hero's burial, with burial. Burial. I made fun of this Alaskan woman a few days ago for saying burial, but it's burial. I always heard it as burial, not burial, whatever. He was given a hero's burial with representatives both from our regiment and our French counterparts. We were especially impressed by the appearance of General Mittelhauser, who came down from division headquarters to express condolences and appreciation to the black troops now under his command. All right, so I love this section so far. Chapter 2 is good. Once again, the writing has not changed. The storytelling ability has not changed. He's direct and to the point, and he doesn't waste too much time on detail, but still it feels lush and still feels full. This is excellent writing. This is how you write an autobio. This is how you write an autobio. Keep it just plain, but also keep it like full. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's go to part 2 of our reading today, the Soissons sector. Despite the fact that we had been in a quiet sector, it was still the front lines with its daily tensions of anticipated attack. In the middle of August, we were pulled out of the Argonne sector and sent to rest behind the lines of Bar-le-Duc. We were deeply pleased by the hospitality and kindness extended to us by the townspeople there. They invited us into their homes and plied us with food and wine. Half jokingly, they told us to come back after the war and we could have our pick of the girls. As we did throughout our stay in France, we deported ourselves well. For pleasures of the flesh, there were a number of legal houses of prostitution, our houses of pleasure, quote unquote, as they were called by the French. It was with regret that we left that area. That's all you need to say. We were sad we left the whole houses behind. All right. By this time, we had become an integral part of the French army. Along with our French equipment, training, and so forth, we had affected the style of the French poilu, or doughboy. What is that, doughboy? I don't know anything about that. The flaps of our overcoats were buttoned back in order to give us more leg room while on the march, as was their style. Oh, he's talking about the puffy outfits that the French soldiers wear. It looks kind of baggy, baggy around the legs. I see. Okay. Like the French infantry, we used walking sticks, which helped to ease the burden of our 70 pounds of equipment. French peasants along the road, hearing our strange language and noticing our color, would often mistake us for French colonials, not Senegalese, who were practically all black, but Algerians, Moroccans, or Sudanese. Interesting. So he's saying that when the French saw the African Americans coming, they said, oh, those aren't Senegalese. They not like us, but those must be Algerians or Moroccans, or they must be from Sudan. Interesting. Anyway, we would sing along the road to the tune of our favorite marching song. My old mistress promised me, raise a ruckus tonight. When she died, she set me free. Raise a ruckus tonight. Hey, she lived so long, her head got bald. Raised a ruckus tonight. She didn't get to set me free at all. We raised a ruckus tonight. Oh, come along, little children, come along while the moon is shining bright. Get on board, on down the river flow, gonna raise a ruckus tonight. Okay, out of all the songs, that's the weakest. We had some fire songs in chapter 1. The songs are getting weaker. I'm looking forward to the Soviet songs, looking forward to the communist anthems later in this text, but that one was a weak joint. And I also sang it weak too. Anyway, but we had not escaped the long arm of American racism. We were rudely confronted with this reality upon our arrival in a small town on the Compiègne front in the department of Meuse. We entrained here for our next front. The regiment was confronted dramatically with the effects of the racist campaign launched by the American high brass. Upon entering the town, the regiment was drawn up in battalion formation in the square. Before being assigned to billets, we were informed by the battalion commander that a black soldier from a labor battalion had been court-martialed and hanged in the very square where we were standing. It had happened just a few weeks before our arrival. His crime was the raping of a village girl. His body had been left hanging there for 24 hours as a demonstration of American justice. Now, anywhere the U.S. Army goes, rape will happen because that's just the nature of American soldiers and also other armies too. But American soldiers are famous for going other places and leaving children behind. Mostly the white soldiers, just by sheer number because most of the army is white, right? But the number one people who leave children behind are American soldiers. And yeah, there were a lot of white and black GIs lynched, not lynched, but hanged during World War II for raping the women in Europe, right? And so this, I understand, is common, but it's also understandable that maybe these white commanders of the battalions said, oh yeah, this black man is having a consensual relationship with a white French woman while we're out here. We're going to bring back that Mississippi, that Louisiana justice to France. You get what I'm saying? So who knows? Who knows what happened? All of this happened so long ago. Everybody is long dead and gone. So there's probably justice that will never be served for some of these cases. But continuing here. As a result, he told us, you may find the town population hostile. In case this is so, the major warned, you are not to be provoked or to take umbrage at any discourtesies, but are to deport yourselves as gentlemen at all times. In any case, we were to be there only for a few days, during which time we were to remain close to our barracks. Then, in a lowered voice, he muttered, this is what I have been told to tell you. We kept close to our billets the first day or so, but then gradually ventured further into town. At first, the townsfolk seemed to be aloof, but the coolness was gradually broken down, probably as a result of our correct deportment, especially our attitude towards the children, with whom we always immediately struck up friendships. Friendly relations were finally established with the villagers. When we asked about the hanging, they shrugged the matter off. Shout out to Kamal for the fist pound. Kamal, Comrade Kamal up into the chat. He is the lieutenant of the Defense from Crackerdom League. Anybody wants to join, send your application to Kamal. We're going to get you a uniform. So what? That was only one soldier. The others were nice enough. When asked why they had been so aloof when we first arrived, they said it was the result of the warnings of the white officers. They didn't want us to fraternize with the blacks. Continuing the conversation, they seemed puzzled about why the sentence had been so severe and the body barbarously left exposed in the square. Très brutal, très horrible. Very horrible, very brutal is what that translates to. I know some French. I'm not that dumb. I know some French. Anyway, they exclaimed with regard to the girl. Ah, she had been raped many times before. One of them. I don't think the girl was raped. She was probably, the local, easy girl. You know what I mean? And then this black soldier had relations with her, and the white captains said, we got to lynch him. We got to kill him. And once again, I said this in the previous live stream, France is an anti-black nation. The UK is an anti-black nation. But the way America does anti-black racism is so gross that it makes them say, ugh. You know what I mean? So the American commanders and generals went to the French and British commanders and generals and told them, hey, be disrespectful, be racist to our black American soldiers, don't fraternize with them. And the way the Americans did it was so gross and so untactful that it made the opposite happen. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, after 2 weeks of rest, the regiment began to move by stages toward the front lines again. A few days later, we boarded a train consisting of a long line of boxcars. Each car was marked 40 hommes ou 8 chevaux, 40 men or 8 horses. Okay, my French is horrible. I was just bragging on it. That was horrible. My pronunciation is shit. Anyway, or met. My pronunciation is met. Anyway, the last couple of months had been quiet and relatively pleasant, with the exception of the Lee incident and the events just related. But now we felt we were going into the thick of it. Ferry. There could be no doubt about it, even though part of the sign had been blown away and only the word Terry remained. The woods around the station and Belleau Woods, a few miles further on, looked like they had been hit by a cyclone, broken and uprooted trees, gaping shell holes, men from the Graves registration walking around with crosses, black pioneers removing ammunition. All were grim reminders of the great battles that had been fought there by American troops only several weeks before. I think Kamal is laughing. Oh, I don't know if Kamal is laughing at my French pronunciation or if he's talking about being the lieutenant of the Defense from Crackerdom League. I'm telling y'all want to join the league? Holla at Kamal. Comrade Kamal is going to fill out your applications. He's going to get your uniform size. He's going to get you right. The Defense from Crackerdom League has started. Anyway, so We were on the Soissons front, where we became part of the famous Armée Mangeant. General Mangeant, Le Boucher, or the Butcher, as he was called by the French, was commander of the 10th Army of France, among whom were a number of shock troops. Chasseurs Alpines, Chasseurs d'Afrique, Algerians and Moroccans, Senegalese riflemen, and the Foreign Legion. His army was pivotal in breaking the Hindenburg line about Soissons. On this front, we were brigaded with the 59th French Division under the command of General Vince Don. I'm not going to lie to y'all. One of the stupidest things I ever thought about doing, and who knows what my life will be like. I was about 24 when I thought about joining the French Foreign Legion. I swear to God, I really looked into it. I was planning on doing it. I was looking at flights to France, where the office was. Like, I was literally going to land at Charles de Gaulle and, like, catch a bus and then walk to the station, everything like that. I thought about joining the French Foreign Legion. I know that's crazy. I know it was really crazy. I wonder what my life would be like had I done it. You know what I mean? But c'est la vie. C'est la vie, as they say in France. Anyway. We bypassed Ferry and Belleau Woods and detrained at the village of Villers-Cotterêts, the birthplace of Alexander Dumas. The atmosphere was charged with expectancy. Observation balloons hung like giant sausages on the horizon. Big guns rumbled ominously in the distance. A steady stream of ambulances carrying wounded jammed the roads leading from the front. Obviously, a big battle was in progress not too far away, but it turned out that we were not going into that sector. We left the village and marched west to Crépy and Vallot. Turning north through the Compiègne forest, we reached the Ice River. I'm not going to do this. The thing is, man, I don't know how to pronounce this French shit. Should I say it with full American pronunciation? The Compiègne forest. We reached the Assigny River. What am I supposed to say here? I don't know what to do. At a point near Vic-sur-Assigny, I don't know. Vic-sur-Assigny, and continued on to Resson-les-Longues. Yeah, that just happened. Somebody revoked my Louisiana card. I know somebody's going to say, oh, you're from Louisiana. You should know some French. Fuck, I don't. All right. The march from the railhead to Resson took about 3 days. It was a forced march and covered about 25 kilometers, 15 miles a day. Kamal jumped into the chat. He says, it's not my style, comrade. The Defense League I snickered at. You gave it effort. My French is horrible. That's really bad. I'm sorry, man. I apologize. Anyway, this was pretty rough after the restless night we had spent on the crowded train. As one of the company wags observed, one thing about these kilometers, they sure will kill you if you keep on meeting them. That's kind of funny. That's such a dad joke. One thing about these kilometers, they sure will kill you if you keep on meeting them. Boo. Anyway, our regiment spent 6 months in the lines in all. We took part in the 59-day drive at Mangin's 10th Army, which ended on the day of the armistice. During that period, one or another of our units was always under fire or fighting. Our toughest battles were at the Death Valley jump off near the Asne Canal, the taking of Mont Singe, Monkey Mountain, which was later renamed Hill 370 in honor of our regiment. Okay, that's hard. Shout out to the French. They had a mountain called Monkey Mountain, and who knows why they called it that. But instead of calling it Monkey Mountain, realizing how racist that sounds, they named it Hill 370 in honor of the black soldiers who came there. That's fire. Shout out to the French. Salute. Anyway, fighting at a railroad embankment northwest at Guillemette Farm, and the advance into the Hindenburg line at the Osny Triangle. It was in the battles of the Hindenburg line that we met the strongest enemy resistance and sustained most of our losses. The enemy resistance was broken in these battles, and they began a general withdrawal, at first orderly and accompanied by brief rearguard actions. Finally, there was the fight to the Belgian frontier, destroying roads and railroads on orders to impede our advance. After Léon, their flight was so precipitous that we had difficulty maintaining contact. We entered many villages which they had left the day before. Our outfit was the first Allied troops to enter the fortified city of Léon, wresting it from the Germans after 4 years of war. I don't know if he's talking about Leon, the one that we spell in English with Lyon. because he's saying Laon. So I don't know if it's the same city or a different city. I don't know if there's a Laon, Laon in France. That sounds crazy. We have Leon and Leon, and you stupid Americans cannot pronounce it. What? I don't know. Anyway. So, yeah, we were greeted with tremendous elation by the population who had lived under German occupation the whole of that period. Okay, that was a bar. That was a rhyme. He was so close. We were greeted with tremendous elation by the population who had lived under German occupation during the whole duration. It was right there. It was right there. Just the whole duration. Boom, bar, Jay-Z. Okay, yeah, Kopamani, we're going to put you in timeout. We're going to put you in timeout because the reason I'm blocking people on my channel is because I run this motherfucker. If you don't like what I have to say, start your own YouTube channel, comment about what I have to say, and show your face. Show your face. If you don't like what I have to say, show your face and say it. That's the beauty of YouTube. Everybody has a voice, but I also have a platform. And the same thing if I had an Instagram or a Twitter and y'all were calling me all sorts of N-words and monkeys in it and all sorts of stuff, y'all would get blocked. That's what this is. This is my social media. Deal with it. Live with it. Anyway. So, the regiment was highly praised by the French. It won 21 Distinguished Service Crosses, 68 Croix de Guerre, Croix de Guerre, okay? Hold on, wait. 68 Croix de Guerre and 1 Distinguished Service Medal. In the whole 2 months drive, casualties were 500 killed and wounded, a total of about 1/5 of the regiment. These casualties were light when compared with those of black regiments on the other fronts. For example, the 371st Infantry of drafted men lost 1,065 out of 2,384 men in 3 days fighting during the Great September Defensive on the Compiègne front. I believe that the German resistance on these other fronts, east and west of Soissons, was most stubborn than on our front. Was more stubborn than on our front. All of our black regiments were fortunate to have been brigaded with the French. In this respect, the American High Command did us a big favor, unintentionally, I am sure. For as far as we were able to observe, the French made no discrimination in the treatment of black officers and men with whom they fraternized freely. They regarded us as brothers in arms. Similarly, the French people in the villages in which we stopped or were stationed were uniformly courteous and friendly, and we made many friends. I must say that we were also on our best behavior. I don't remember a single incident of misbehavior on the part of our men toward French villagers. The latter were quick to notice this and to contrast our gentlemanly deportment with the rudeness of the white Americans. Many of the white soldiers made no effort to hide their disdain for the French, whom they regarded as inferiors and commonly referred to them as frogs, of course. Going to the comments, Kamal says, mind-blowing considering how they did Haiti. I know it is kind of mind-blowing how the French are, I don't know, the French are paradoxical because most black Americans have traveled to France and had a great time. Also, there's a love affair affinity between black America and France. But yet and still, there's probably been no other country that has been more wicked to black people globally than the French. I mean, all of West Africa, most of North Africa, you get what I'm saying? Then also, we have the Caribbean with Haiti, Guadeloupe, etc. It's really nasty what the French do. But yet and still, they'll be like, we love Josephine Baker and Beyonce. I don't know. Make it make sense. Anyway, but even as we fought, we were being stabbed in the back by the American High Command. We were not to learn, however, until our return to the States of the slanderous, racist, the American General Staff Headquarters through its brainwashed French mission, the secret information concerning black American troops referred to earlier. We learned also that the hanging of the black soldier on the Compiègne front was not an isolated incident, but part of a deliberate campaign conducted by higher and lower echelons in the American command to influence French civilians against blacks. The campaign focused on the effort to build up the black rapist scare among them. Ugh, horrific. Such was a memorandum issued by headquarters of the 92nd Division, a black division officered largely by whites, on August 21st, 1918. Its purpose was to prevent the presence of colored troops from being a menace to women. The memorandum read in part, On account of increasing frequency of the crime of rape or attempted rape in this division, drastic preventative measures have become necessary. Until further notice, there will be a check of all troops of the 92nd Division every hour daily between Reveille and 11 p.m. with a written record showing how each check was made, by whom, and the result. The 1 mile limit regulation will be strictly enforced at all times, and no passes will be issued except to men of known reliability. Policing the black man's body even outside of America, of course. This was followed by the next day by another memorandum saying that the commander-in-chief of the American Expeditionary Forces would send the 92nd Division back to the States or break it up into labor battalions as unfit to bear arms in France if efforts to prevent rape were not taken more seriously. As a result, Dr. Robert R. Moton of Tuskegee was sent by President Wilson and the Secretary of War to investigate the charges. He found only one case of rape in the whole division of 15,000 men. 2 other men who were from labor battalions in the 92nd area were convicted. One of these was hanged, and I'm sure that this was the unfortunate soldier whom we saw on the Compiègne front. General Headquarters was forced to admit that the crime of rape, as later stated by Moton, was no more prevalent among colored soldiers than among whites or any other soldiers. This whole racist smear of black troops, I was to conclude later, represented but an extension to France of the anti-black racist campaign then current in the United States. It was designed to maintain black subjugation and prevent its erosion by liberal racial attitudes of the French. Back in the States, the campaign was marked by an upturn of lynchings during the war years, with 38 black victims in 1917, and half again that number in the following year. Even then, things were working up to the bloody riots of 1919. Interesting. So what he's trying to say here is that, by the Americans going to France and abroad, spreading racist rhetoric about black people, it also had blowback too, because every time America goes to war, there's violence that comes back home. It's not a coincidence that every time we go and send our boys to Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, they come back and start shooting up nightclubs, killing their wives, killing their children. You know what I mean? All sorts of wicked stuff is often done by former veterans. You get what I'm saying? Not mentioning also the unaliving of themselves. And so, yeah, the racism that was spread abroad also came back with the white soldiers who came back from World War I, and also now that they're military trained and restless after being trained to kill. Of course, they're going to turn their sights on black folks, right? So that culminates in the bloody summer of 1919. Continuing here. So in contrast to all of this, the appreciation of the French for black soldiers from the U.S. was shown by the accolade given by the French division commander, General Vince Don, to our regiment. On December 19, 1918, we were transferred from the French Army back to the American Army. On that day, General Order 4785, directed by the 59th Division of the Army of France, was read to the officers and men of the 370th. It commended us for our contributions to France. I remember being struck by the poetry of the language. It was all beautifully French to me. We, at first in September at Meru-sur-Uruk, admitted our fine appearance under arms, the precision of your review, the suppleness of your evolutions that presented to the eye the appearance of silk unrolling its waves. Okay, that's hella poetic. That's very, very poetic. Further on, in remembering our dead, the communiqué read, "The blood of your comrades who fell on the soil of France, mixed with the blood of our soldiers, renders indissoluble the bonds of affection that unite us." So the French were very glad and thankful that other people came from other parts of the world to fight for their country, fight for their freedom. Because let's keep it real, if Germany or the Kaiser, whatever, invaded France, took over the country, America would have been fine. America didn't have to get involved in World War I, didn't have to get involved in World War II, but we did. A lot of young black men went to France, went to Germany, went to Italy, many parts of the world to fight for white people to have their own freedom because they were killing themselves again. Whenever the white folks start killing themselves, it always takes black men and women to save them, and that's what happened in World War I and World War II. At least France could say merci, merci beaucoup. Anyway, so the road home. The road back from Soissons lay through the old battlefields where we had fought a couple of months before. Near Anisay-le-Château, There were crosses marking the graves of some of our comrades who had died in the fighting there. We paused before the graves, seeking out those of the comrades we knew. We all had the same thoughts. What rotten luck that they should die almost in sight of victory. Among the crosses, there was one marked Sergeant Theodore Gamelin. Gamelin hadn't died in battle. I remember the incident clearly. We were all lined up in some hastily dug trenches that morning, waiting for the over-the-top signal. The cooks had just distributed reserved rations. These consisted of a half loaf of French bread, not the crispy white kind, but a coarse grayish loaf baked especially for the troops, which we called war bread, and a big bar of chocolate. Somehow, Gamelin had missed out on these rations. Jump-off time was drawing near. He looked around and his eyes fixed upon a private named Brown, who was sitting on the firing step, putting his rations in a knapsack. Now, Private Brown was one of those quiet, meek little fellows. He always took low, was never known to fight. But Brown was the type of man, I have observed, who can become dangerous. This is particularly true in a combat situation where one doesn't know whether one will live 5 minutes longer. Gamelin, a big bullying type, an amateur boxer, and very unpopular with his men, called to Brown, "Give me some of that bread, Brown. I didn't get my rations." "Now, that's just too bad, Sergeant," Brown responded. "I'm not going to give you any of this bread. It's not my fault you missed your rations." Gamelin, with one hand on his pistol, moved as though he were going to seize the bread. Brown had his rifle lying across his lap. He simply raised it and coolly pulled the trigger. The sergeant fell dead. So this guy killed a man over a loaf of bread. Now, I don't know about that. That's wild. That's wild to me. But it's about respect, too. You don't want nobody thinking they could just do whatever to you, right? I don't know. The platoon commander heard the commotion and ran to the spot, inquiring about what had happened. The men told him that Gamelin was trying to take Brown's reserve rations and had made a move toward his pistol. Brown, they said, had shot in self-defense. Obviously, nothing could be done about Brown in those circumstances. So the lieutenant said, "Consider yourself under arrest, Brown. We will take this matter up after this action." Unfortunately, Brown was killed a few days later. The memory of this incident was on our minds as we viewed Gamelin's grave. His helmet hung on a cross, which ironically bore the inscription, "Sergeant Theodore Gamelin, mort pour la France, died for France, September 1918. I had gone through 6 months at the front without a scratch or a day of illness, but as we neared Soissons, I began to feel faint and lightheaded. By the time we reached the city, I had developed quite a high fever. It was the period of the first great flu epidemic which wreaked havoc among U.S. troops in France. I reported to the infirmary and lined up with a group of about 50 men. The medical sergeant took our temperatures and then tied tags to our coats. I looked at mine and it read influenza. We were evacuated to a field hospital near Soissons, where I remained for about 5 days. After that, we boarded a hospital train and we were told that we were going to the big base hospital in Paris. Now, I liked that. I had never seen Paris and was most anxious to visit the famed city before going home. There were 2 of us in the compartment, another soldier from the regiment and myself. I felt a little drowsy, so I told my compartment mate that I was going to take a little nap and to wake me up when the chow came around. I awoke 5 days later in a French hospital at Mont-sur-Seine near Paris. They had put me off the train as an emergency case just before Paris. I came out of a coma to find a number of strange people around my bed. Nurses who were Catholic nuns, doctors, and a number of patients. They were all smiling. "Thank God, young man," said the doctor. "We thought we were going to lose you. You've been in a coma for 5 days, but you're going to be all right now." That's scary. I couldn't imagine being in a coma for 5 days. I couldn't imagine being in a coma for 1 day. Like just blacking out and then waking up somewhere strange. That's crazy. Now, that did happen to me one time. I'm not going to lie. I got blackout drunk on my graduation day from university, and then I just woke up in my bed. Last thing I remember, I was sitting on a bench, just dazed out of my mind, you know what I mean, blitzed. Next thing you know, I'm in my bed, I pull the covers off, and I got those sticky things that you get from the hospital, you know what I mean, and I wipe it off my chest. I'm like, what the fuck happened? And I wasn't even hungover no more or nothing. It was like a really good sleep. But yeah, I don't know how that happened. That was crazy. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, let's continue here. So So they were all smiling. Thank God, we almost thought we lost you. You've been in a coma for 5 days. Where am I? Is this Paris? I asked. No, this is Monte-sur-Seine, close to Paris. They had to put you off here as an emergency case. What's wrong with me? I asked. Oh, you've had a little kidney infection and it has affected your heart. That sounds bad, I said. Well, you're young and have a remarkable constitution. You'll pull through all right. You're out of danger now, he assured me. I remained in the hospital for about a month, receiving the kindest and most solicitous attention from nurses, doctors, and patients. All seemed to regard me as their special charge. No one spoke English, but I got along all right. It was like a crash course in French. They told me I had a beautiful accent. They brought in an old lady to talk English with me, but she bored me to death. Really, my French was better than her English. They were making this man do ESL classes on his deathbed. Anyway, she came once and didn't return. I was feeling much better when the head sister came to me one evening to tell me I was to leave the next morning for Paris and the American hospital at Neuilly. You've never been to Paris, have you? She asked. No, I said. Well, you've got a treat coming. I was filled with great expectations. The next morning, after embracing all my fellow patients and exchanging warm goodbyes with the doctor and sisters, the head nurse or sister took me out in front of the hospital, where an American ambulance was waiting. Hop in, buddy, said the driver. Haywood, be sure to write us when you get back to Chicago, said the sister. Remember, we are your friends and want to know how you are getting along. Aww. I promised that I would. As we pulled out, she stood on the road waving a white handkerchief and continued to wave it as long as we were in sight. I never wrote them, but often thought of them. Aww. Paris, you wondrous city. I was feeling good that morning as we pulled into the hospital at Neuilly. The hospital was situated on the Avenue Neuilly near the Boulevard de la Grande Armée, only a few blocks from the Arc de Triomphe. It was a veritable palace. I was assigned to a ward in which there were only 4 guys, 3 Australians and 1 white American from Wisconsin. They greeted me and gave me a rundown on the situation. They were having a ball seeing Paris, taking in all the events, theaters, racetracks, boxing, and girls. I don't believe that I saw a real sick man in that hospital. Ha ha ha. There were some, of course, but they must have been secluded in some out-of-sight wards. We were all convalescents in our ward. A couple were recuperating from wounds received at the front. What do you do for money? I asked. Oh, we don't worry about that. Just stick around a while and we'll show you the ropes. Under their tutelage, it didn't take me long to catch on. At that time, there were dozens of rich American women, including a number from the social register in Paris. They were under the auspices of the Red Cross and had taken over the hospital and its patients as their special war duty. They would organize excursions, get tickets for shows, sports events, etc. Coming to the hospital in relays, they would leave huge boxes of chocolates and other goodies. We were showered with gifts, Gillette razors, Waterman fountain pens, and even some serviceable wristwatches if you asked for them. They would come in waves. Scarcely had one group left when another would come, leaving the same gifts. The guys had it down perfect. They always left one man on watch in the ward. He was there in case the gals would come in while the others were out and receive all the presents and gifts from them. He would point to the 3 unoccupied beds. There were only 5 of us in a 8-bed ward, and pretend that their occupants were out in the streets. He would suggest that the presents be left for them also. Old Wisconsin Slim was a real genius in all of this. He even hung a couple of crosses over the unoccupied beds to give more substance to the friction that they were occupied. Okay, the one thing is guaranteed. You meet a group of white guys, they will show you how to do crime. You meet a group of white guys, they will show you how to do crime. You meet a group of white guys, they will show you how to do crime. They say, oh, black people commit crimes everywhere we go. We commit fraud, we commit scams, terrorism, all sorts of stuff. Everywhere white men go, they commit crimes. What you're taking gifts from the Red Cross. A group of white men created a cartel to take gifts from the Red Cross because they were too lazy to get jobs. Too lazy to get jobs, and here they are bringing this brother down with him. Sad, absolutely sad. The state of white men. I'm sorry. Every morning, we would gather all our presents, take them to the gate, and sell them for a good price to the French who gathered there to buy them. We would then return to the ward and divide the swag. Razors and fountain pens seemed to be rare in France at that time. The going rate for razors was about 10 francs or $2, and for Waterman fountain pens even more. All this was carried out under the benign gaze of the hospital authorities, doing crime in broad daylight. Doing crime in broad daylight. Discipline was lax, almost non-existent. We could stay out for 2 days at a time. The attitude seemed to be, let the boys have a good time, they deserve it. Besides, it's essential for their convalescence. When we would get a little money together, about once a week, we would run out to Montmartre and the famous Rue Pigalle, Pig Alley, to see the girls. As an old Francophile, I was also interested in French history and culture. I got a guidebook and spent days walking all over Paris, visiting all the historical places about which I had read, mentally reconstructing the events. Going to Kamal, he gave the thumbs up. I think he gave the thumbs up because he agreed. He agreed. Anywhere you meet some white guys, they're going to do some crime, doing some scamming, doing some terrorism, doing some robbery, thievery, trickery, tricknology. Anyway, time was passing rapidly. I had been in the hospital about 2 months when an administrator called me into his office. Well, Corporal Hall, he said, I hope you're having a good time in Paris. Oh, yes, I replied. That's good, he said. We're sending you back to your regiment tomorrow. Where are they? I asked. They're in Brest, waiting to embark for the voyage home. The next morning, I got on the train at the Gare U, and arrived in Brest that evening. In Brest, I strolled around a bit on the waterfront and finally sat down at a sidewalk cafe. I was in no hurry to get back into the old regimental harness. I was about to offer a drink when suddenly a big white MP appeared. Glowering at me, he said, "Where's your pass, soldier?" "Here it is. I've just got back from the hospital in Paris, and I'm going to my outfit up on the hill," I explained. He grabbed it, glanced at it, and shouted, "Well, get going up the hill right now. You're not supposed to hang around here." I left without my drink and started climbing the hill to the old Napoleon barracks where we had been 11 months before. It seemed like that had been years ago. So much had been crowded into the brief intervening period. I rejoined my outfit. They were living in tents in what seemed to me like a swamp. The weather was miserable, a steady cold rain. The mud was ankle deep. I was greeted warmly by my comrades. I don't think that more than half the old boys of my company were left. The rest were dead, wounded, or ill in hospitals all over France. Horrible. A couple of bottles of cognac were produced. The guys started reminiscing about what they were going to do when they got home. The news from home was bad. Discrimination and Jim Crow were rampant, worse than before. Blacks were being lynched everywhere. Now they want us to go to war with Japan, observed one of the fellows. The Hearst newspapers at the time were again raising the specter of the Yellow Peril. All right, Kamal says, pretty much the original troublemakers. Facts. Well, someone said, they won't get me to fight their Yellow Peril. If it comes to that, I'll join the Japs. They are colored. There was unanimous agreement on that point. That's hilarious. I bunkered down that night and awoke the next morning with a high fever. I went to the infirmary and again was evacuated to a hospital. I immediately began to worry whether I would be able to return with my outfit. As I was waiting on the side of the road to hitch a ride to the hospital, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and there was Colonel Roberts, our white commander whom I had not seen for months. I started to spring to my feet and salute, but he motioned me to remain seated. "Corporal, you're from our regiment, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm sick and going to the hospital." "What's the matter?" "I guess I got the flu." "Well," he said, "you're in no condition to walk that distance." He hailed a passing truck and instructed the driver to take me to the hospital. "Take care, son. We're going home soon. Try to come back with us." That's the last time I saw Colonel Roberts. A month later, while in the hospital, I picked up the Paris edition of the Herald Tribune. The headline read, "The 370th Infantry, the Old 8th Illinois returns and is given hero's welcome in victory parade down State Street." I felt pretty bad because I could imagine my old mother standing there waiting for me to pass by. Since I hadn't written in months, she would probably assume the worst. I had been away from the States for quite a while, in free France, so to speak, and I had become less used to the American N-word hating way of life. But I was thrown abruptly back into reality as soon as I crossed the threshold of the American Army Hospital in Brest. It seemed to be all Southern staff. doctors, nurses, etc. All of them spoke with broad southern accents. I was assigned a bed at one end of the ward. When I looked around, I could see only blacks were in that end. Whites were at the other end. There were no screens, no Jim Crow signs. The Jim Crow was de facto, but nonetheless real. I also noticed that there was a large space between the black and white sections. After a cursory entrance examination, the doctor seemed to think that I didn't have the flu, and upon hearing my recent medical history, he decided that it was a relapse of the old illness. I had no sooner gotten settled when I heard a nurse bawling out a black soldier for being so dirty. The poor fellow had just come in from some mud hole like the one in which my regiment was situated, where there was no opportunity to bathe. Kamal's in the chat, he said, someone told me Japs is racist. I don't recognize such a slur. I wouldn't call a Japanese person a Jap. I don't know, it sounds crazy to me. I wouldn't like to use it, but if you feel like using it, go ahead. I mean, if they start calling you, shut up, and I'm sure they have some racist term for black people in Japanese, like black devil or monkey or something, black demon, whatever. Just hurl the J word back at them. Go it, do it, and then smash an anime broad. All right. You don't see any of our white boys that dirty, she shouted, her eyes flashing indignantly at what she, a white lady, was forced to put up with. For the first time, it occurred to me that our black regiment had been put in a worse location than the whites. Now that's pretty hard stuff for a frontline veteran to take. If I had been ill when I came in, I was really sick now. I could feel my blood pressure and fever mount. We read about that in Black Fatigue. In Black Fatigue, racism can make your blood pressure higher and make you have an early death. We have to stay away from as much ism as possible. It's bad for your health. So there was a black sergeant from my outfit in the same ward. He was tall, dignified, and a proud-looking man, convalescing from a previous illness. He wasn't a bed patient and was therefore supposed to make his own bed. This he did, but he never seemed to do it to the satisfaction of the nurse, who kept berating him. Going to Kamal, he says, I wouldn't use it, just astonished. I'll never forget, I was in probably the 8th grade. And I went to, a middle school called Robert E. Lee Middle School, named after a Confederate general who owned slaves, right? And, most of the school was 50% black, 50% white, I would say from my recollection. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 30-70, with the majority being white, whatever. But I'll never forget, there was, one of those redneck crack-ass crackers that I grew up with, and he was giving a presentation about World War II, and he said, America killed the dirty Japs. And the teacher said, don't say that word. That's racist. And he said, what word? Japs? And the whole class started laughing. And that was the first time I even heard the word Japs. But that also let me know he knew a bunch of other racial slurs that his parents probably taught him. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, continuing here. Make it over. That's not enough. That's not good enough, said the white woman to the black man making his bed. I've already made it, and I'm not going to do it again. Don't talk back to me, she shouted. Make that bed. I'm not going to, he said. You dare disobey my order, she yelled. I'm a frontline soldier, and you don't have to yell at me. She turned and walked to the office and returned with the ward doctor, a little pipsqueak of a man. In a stentorian voice, he said, make that bed, soldier. The sergeant didn't move. The doctor looked at his watch and said, I'm giving you 2 minutes to start making that bed. If you don't, I'm going to prefer charges against you for disobeying your superior officers. You could see that the proud sergeant was thinking it over and coming to a decision. I could almost read his mind. It seemed that he was thinking that this wasn't the time to die. He only had a couple more months to go. He finally burst into tears, but he got up and made the bed. I've seen this sort of situation before, and I feel almost certain that had there been a loaded gun around, the sergeant might have started shooting. It would have been reported in the news as another N-word runs amok. All of us, including some of the whites, breathed a sigh of relief at this peaceful culmination of what could have been a dangerous incident. At least the nurse never bothered the sergeant after that. Undoubtedly, she sensed the inherent danger of any further provocation. I love Haywood's framing. I love Harry Haywood's framing of this, man, because every time he talks about, instances of anti-black racism, he always makes it, front and center that the true danger is black retaliation, right? And that black men will retaliate and have retaliated and will not take lying down any sort of racism, right? Like, there's times when you retreat in battle, like this black soldier here, in this case of this white woman telling him to make the bed again. But we always have to remember that, there comes a pushing a limit as far as you can push people. And black people, we've reached that point before, whether it be Haiti, whether it be during the Civil War when we started busting guns at the slave masters, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I love how in this text here, in this situation, where in any other book where they talk about, the old time South, or like, the times of Jim Crow and apartheid, they would say that black man was broken. He was humiliated. He was emasculated. Instead, Haywood says that black man was ready to do some damage. He was ready to fight back. He was ready to burst. You get what I'm saying? Undoubtedly, she sensed the inherent danger of any further provocation. That's retaining, this man's manhood in a certain way. And that's why I love this book so much, and how the framing of so many of these incidents are done. Anyway, after my stay in Paris, I was seized periodically by moods of depression. These deepened and became chronic during my stay at the Brest Hospital, especially after witnessing such humiliating incidents. I felt that I could never again adjust myself to the conditions of blacks in the States after the spell of freedom from racism in France. I did not want to go back, and my feeling was shared by many black soldiers. I thought of remaining in France, getting my discharge there, and possibly becoming a French citizen, but I did not know how to go about this. Besides, I was ill, and there was my mother whom I wanted to see again. Probably someday, if I got well, I would come back, or so I thought as I lay in the hospital at Brest. Finally, the day came. We were discharged from the hospital, given casual's pay, 1 month's pay, which in my case amounted to $33, and boarded the ship for home. There was no change in the Jim Crow pattern. We were merely transferred from a Jim Crow hospital to a Jim Crow hospital ship. We blacks found ourselves quartered in a separate section of the ship. The segregation, however, did not extend to the mess hall or the lavatories. I guess they would have been too much trouble, but the ship's military command passed up no opportunity to let us know our place. For example, on the first day, we were given tickets for mess, breakfast, lunch, and supper. We were supposed to present them to the checker who stood at the foot of the stairway leading up to the mess hall. A black soldier who had evidently misplaced his ticket tried to slip up the checker unnoticed, but he was not quick enough. A cracker officer who was standing by the checker hollered, "Hey, N-word, come back here." The guy kept going and tried to merge into a group of us blacks who had already passed through. Again, the officer shouted, "N-word, come back here. You, I mean the tall one over there. That N-word knows who I'm calling." The soldier finally turned and walked back. Purple with rage, protected by his bars and white skin, the officer said, "Listen, you black son of a bitch, where is your ticket?" Clearly, the officer had already gauged his man and concluded that there was no fight in him. "I couldn't find it," said the soldier. "Well, why didn't you say that in the first place instead of trying to slip through here?" "Well, you go on back and try to find it. If you can't see the sergeant in charge, don't ever try that trick again," said the officer. His anger seemed to ebb, and a glow of self-satisfaction spread across his face. He had done his chore for the day. He had put an N-word in his place. All right. Kamal says, "That's effed up. You had to attend that school." Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But hopefully they changed that name. I think they did change the name of the school. But so the seas were rough again. It was a small ship leased from the Japanese. Most of us were seasick. The sailors were having a ball at our expense. When one of us would rush to the rail to vomit, one of them would holler, "$1, he comes." One night, the ship tilted sharply, and a number of us were thrown out of our bunks. The bunks were in tiers, and I was in the top one. I got a pretty hard bump. The next morning on deck, the sailors were talking loudly among themselves, for our benefit, of course. "Gee," said one, "this is one of the roughest seas I've ever seen. This old pile is about to come apart. The Japs leased us the worst ship they had. It just might be sabotage," another one suggested. "I hope we make it, but I'm not so sure," said another. Not being seamen, most of us were taking this seriously. A black soldier turned to me and said, "You know, a man, after all I've been through, if this ship were to sink now, almost in sight of home, I would get off and walk the water like the good Lord." Another voice, that of a white sergeant from Florida, who had been rather friendly to us, "You know," he drawled, "this reminds me of old Sam down home." Here it comes, we thought, one of those N-word jokes. He was up there on the gallows with a rope around his neck, and the sheriff said, "Well, Sam, is there anything you want to say before you die?" "All I gotta say, Sheriff," said Sam, "this show would be a lesson to me." Wicked that was funny to white men. White men have no sense of humor. They have no sense of humor. The voyage proceeded uneventfully, with one exception. The gamblers among us were out to get the soldiers' casual pay. The law of concentration of money into fewer and fewer hands was in process. This was taking place in one of the endless crap games which started in the Bay of Biscay and wound up at Sandy Hook. I'd never really gambled, even in the army, with room and board guaranteed. If you were broke, you could always borrow some money. The lender knew you couldn't run out on him. His only risk was that you might become a casualty. But motivated by nothing more than sheer boredom, I got into the game this time. After all, what good was $33 going to do me? To my surprise, I hit a streak of luck, and over a period of a week, in and out of the game, I ran my paltry grub stake up to the tremendous sum of $1,200. Okay, he was really balling. He turned 33 to 1,200. That was the high point, after which time my luck began to peter out. Nevertheless, I left the ship with $500. It was my last gambling venture. He should have stopped on top. Anyway, that morning we lined up at the rail as our ship passed Sandy Hook and pulled into the New York harbor. It was my first view of the New York skyline. Overcome with emotion, tears welled up in my eyes. Embarrassed, I looked around and found that I was not alone. The guy next to me was obviously crying. Our landing was a memorable one. Ship stacks were blasting, foghorns blowing, bells were ringing, and fireboats were sending up great sprays of water. Passengers and ferry boats were waving and shouting greetings. All right. Kamal says more like evil humor. Yeah, the white man laughs at like dead baby jokes and like, raping children. Like that's what the white man finds funny. And anyway, all right. Upon docking, we were met by two reception committees of young women, a white one to receive the white soldiers and a black one to greet us. This time segregation didn't bother us at all. We were so pleased to see the pretty black girls. They drew us aside as we came down the gangplank, ushered us into waiting ambulances, and drove us to the Grand Central Palace, which had been converted into a debarkation hospital. Leaving us in the lobby, they said goodbye and promised to come back soon and showed us around. A woman from the Red Cross took our home addresses to notify our families of our arrival. We were then escorted into a large room and told to strip off our clothes. Leaving them in the room, we then went through the delousing process. We were sprayed with some sort of chemical and washed off under showers. We were then given pajamas and a bathrobe and shown to our Jim Crow ward. The next day, after a physical examination, we were paid off, receiving all of our back pay. In my case, it was for 12 months, amounting to about $450. This plus the $500 I had won on the ship seemed to me a small fortune, the largest amount of money I had ever had in my life. I was, so to speak, chafing at the bit, raring to get out and up to famed Harlem. On the ship, I had met a black sergeant named Patterson, who was from the 369th, the old 15th New York. He had also won a considerable sum in the crap game. He suggested that we team up and go to Harlem together. He said he knew his way around there since that was where he lived before he joined the army. After the payoff, we were still without clothes, but a clothing salesman came around to take orders for new uniforms. Patterson and I ordered suits for which we were measured. In a couple of hours, the man was back with two brand new whipcord uniforms with chevrons and service stripes sewed on. We had also ordered shoes, which were promptly delivered. We then sneaked out to the hospital. After we banked most of our money downtown, we took the subway to the 125th Street and visited several buffet flats, a current euphemism for high-class whorehouse, drinking and looking over the girls. Patterson seemed to be an old friend of all the madams. They greeted him like a long-lost brother. We finally wound up in one real classy joint where we stayed for 4 days, playing Sultan in a harem with the girls. Oh, y'all nasty. Oh, y'all were nasty. They were fucking all the hoes. They had $900. Boy, I got $900 and a new pair of shoes. I'm about to fuck these bitches. That's insane. That's nasty. You was in a hoe house for 4 days? Sultan in a harem. I've never heard of that game. Who played that game? Goddamn. Anyway, We returned to the hospital, expecting to be sharply reprimanded and restricted to quarters, but the doctor on his rounds merely asked, "Where have you boys been?" Before we could answer, he simply said, "I suggest that you stick around a day or two. We have some tests to make." From New York, we left for Camp Grant near Rockford, Illinois, where we were demobilized out of the service. I was discharged on April 29, 1919. After a cursory examination, I was pronounced physically fit. "What about my chronic endocarditis and chronic nephritis?" I protested. "Oh, you're all right. You've overcome it all. You're young and fit as a fiddle," the doctor answered me. From Camp Grant, I returned home to Chicago to see my parents. Aww. Well, continuing here, this will be the last section we're going to read, Reunion with Otto. Then we're going to wrap it up. If you got any more comments or questions, let us know. Shout out to Kamal for being in here. This is only about 4 or 5 pages or so. But yeah, really looking forward to diving into Chapter 3. And Chapter 2 has been hella dope so far. I'm really liking this book. So, continuing. Not too long after my discharge, I came home one evening to find Otto. He had just arrived after mustering out of the service at Camp Grant. We were all happy to see him, especially Mother. He showed us his honorable discharge. "You know," he said, "I'm lucky to get this." He then told stories about his harrowing experiences in a stevedore battalion in the South and then in France. The main mass of black draftees had been relegated to these labor units, euphemistically called service battalions, engineers, pioneer infantry, etc. Regardless of education or ability, young blacks were herded indiscriminately into these stevedore outfits and faced with drudgery and hard work with no possibility of promotion beyond the rank of corporal. With few exceptions, the officers were KKK whites, as also were the sergeants. Many of them were plantation-riding boss types, especially recruited for these jobs. Southern newspapers openly carried want ads calling for white men who had experience in handling Negroes. Black draftees were not only subjugated to the drudgery of hard labor, but insults, abuse, and in many cases, blows from white officers and sergeants. Otto told us his worst experience was in Camp Stewart in Newport News, Virginia, where he was stationed during the terribly cold winter of 1917 and 1918. For a considerable period after their arrival, they were forced to live in tents without floors or stoves. In most cases, they only had a blanket, some not even that. New arrivals to the camp were forced to stand around fires outside all night or sleep under trees for partial protection from the weather. For months, there were no bathing facilities nor clothing for the men. These conditions were subsequently changed as a result of protests by the men and reports by investigators. That's hard. That's savage. That's savage. Oh my God. His outfit landed in the port of Saint-Lazare, France, and during the Great Advance participated in the all-out effort to keep the front line supplied in the race to Berlin. They worked from dawn to nightfall unloading supplies, including all kinds of railroad equipment, engines, tractors, and bulldozers. They built and repaired roads, warehouses, and barracks. Discipline was strict. Guys were thrown in the guardhouse on the most flimsy pretexts. A black soldier seen on the street with a French woman was likely to be arrested by the MPs. "The spirit of Saint-Lazare," said one officer, "is the spirit of the South." Needless to say, Otto often found himself in the guardhouse as a result of fights, AWOLs, etc. How he escaped general court-martial or imprisonment, I don't know. His outfit was finally moved to the American military base at Le Mans, about 100 miles from Paris. Things were somewhat better there. There were even a few reliable black corporals who were allowed weekend passes to visit Paris. Otto was assigned to mess duty as a cook. When he applied for leave, he was refused, however. "Well, I didn't intend to come this close to Paris without seeing it," he said, "so I went AWOL." He did not see much of it, however, before he was arrested by MPs. I was surprised to learn that he had been in Paris during the period and I was in the hospital in Neuilly. Most of the time in the great city was spent in the Hotel St. Anne, the notorious American military jail run by the sadistic Marine captain, Hard-Boiled Smith. Here, now bitter and disillusioned, Otto continued his rebellion. It led him first to the Garvey movement, where he served for a brief period as an officer in Garvey's Black Legion. Then in succession, Wobblies or Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, the African Blood Brother, and finally the Communist Party, joining soon after his Unity Convention in 1921. After returning from the service, Otto stayed at home only a short time and then moved in with some of his new friends. So, That's his brother Otto, who had a tougher life. He's 7 years older than him, and it seems like his time in France was much, much harder than Harry Haywood's time in France. So very interesting. Looking forward to seeing what happens next. My guess is that his brother Otto is going to influence him, Harry Haywood, to join the Communist Party. We will see when we start chapter 3 in tomorrow's reading. Want to give a shout out to everybody who stayed tuned for this. Let me know what you think of this book. Let me know what books you think we should read next. And shout out to Kamal once again for being in the chat. Shout out to all the racist white supremacists blowing up this channel, supporting all the other content, making sure that I can get that rent paid, pay these utilities, all that good stuff. Y'all be easy out there, and peace.